Hello everyone, I'm Cheryl Kane Piasecki with the Institute for Ethics and Government, and I'm very happy to be with you today to talk about new employee orientation. Before we get started, I just want to take a few minutes to say that I hope that everyone is taking very good care of themselves. This is a trying time, a difficult time for us all, and I think it's important that we all take care of our physical well-being as well as our mental and emotional well-being, and I hope that you are doing just that. So today we're going to talk about new employee orientation as an agency culture boot camp. I know you're probably saying, well, that's a pretty big title, Cheryl, and that seems to have an awful lot of ambition. And it does have a lot of ambition. It was an idea that I developed for the National Government Ethics Summit, and I thought about it a lot in advance of the summit, but I think that a lot of the concepts we're going to be talking about today and the new framing and viewpoint that I would like you to have with respect to how you conduct and how you view the purpose of your new employee orientation will be informed by a sense of who is it that we're onboarding these days and into what environments are we onboarding them, and what duty do we have, what obligation do we have to these new employees to try to do our best to give them some facsimile of a sense of belonging, a sense of identity with our organizations when we're asking them from the get-go to be working effectively in isolation at home. So the inspiration for not just the title, but generally the whole framing for this perspective on new employee orientation came from a government executive article that I came across. The title in particular I found very compelling. Every agency needs a Semper Fi. Every agency needs a Semper Fi. I want you to sit with that for just a moment or two and think about what that means to you and how that strikes you. I don't think you need a whole lot of time with it to be able to describe the effect that it probably had. I'm not a Marine. I have never belonged to the Marine Corps. I don't speak Latin or read Latin or know Latin. But I know what this Semper Fi means and represents to me. And for me, it represents loyalty and duty and honor and service. It's a sense of mission and pride and esprit de corps. And if it means all those things to me, I cannot even imagine how Semper Fi resonates with the wonderful men and women of our United States Marine Corps. So what is it that Semper Fi represents for anyone who sees it, but most importantly, I would assume, for people of the Marine Corps? It's a sense of identity. This is what it means to be a Marine. This is who we are. It's a sense of purpose. This is what we do. This is what we believe in. This is what we represent. And it's most certainly then a sense of belonging. That if you're a Marine, this is what it means to be a Marine, and this is what it means for all of us to be Marines. Now, not every agency necessarily has a slogan, but every agency certainly has an identity, and every agency certainly has a purpose. And the employees who belong to those agencies certainly want to have and do have a sense of belonging that is related to the mission, the vision, the goals of the organization. What one has to believe and feel and commit to in order to make sure that that mission, those goals, those visions are realized successfully. In another government executive article, they had done some polling of some federal employees. And according to the survey results, 72% of the people, the federal employees who responded to that survey, said they were proud to work for their organization. So pride is a motivating factor. The majority of respondents said that workplace culture wasn't only important for their own sense of identity and pride, but that they believed it was important for the organization's productivity, its efficiency, and its success. So this isn't just, feel-good emotional moments. This is very much people's attitudes about their workplace and about the sense of purposefulness in their agency's missions and functions is very important for the level of productivity and the overarching success of the organization. It's also important, evidently, to attract and keep employees. So let's think about your new employee for a moment. Obviously, something about your organization attracted them to you. And certainly you want to keep them in your organization. You've spent time and resources trying to get them to apply, and you've spent time and resources in selecting them as people who are going to be working in your organization. But I think it's especially important to note that federal employees really have a strong attraction to public service. And so the cultural aspects of public service are something that we can use to attract and keep people in our organizations. So again, in our new employee orientation, we should be focusing on creating a sense of identity for the organization that the person can identify with then too. Helping them understand what the purpose of our organization is, what it is we do, what it is we value and believe, so that they can then know how they fit in. How do I belong? Where do I see myself? You hired me to do this job, but where does it fit into this overarching sense of identity and purpose of the organization? Now, we all know that when you're a federal government employee, we have multiple identities. And so in this first part of a two-part series on new employee orientation, we are going to be focusing on the question of who are we? Who are we with our various sort of levels of identity as federal employees? So in answering the question, who are we are going to be answering the question, what is it that we do? What is it that we value and believe? And then, how do we actually do our work? How do our values and beliefs show up in the work that we do, so that when we are working on a day-to-day basis, the job that we're doing and the way that we do it is consistent, that it demonstrates the values and beliefs that we say we espouse. So if we deal with the sort of first level of identity, which is we're executive branch employees, we're federal employees, we're public servants, what is our sense of identity at that level? And I think one of the common pieces of identity that we have is our oath of office. We swear or affirm that we'll support and defend the Constitution. We say that we will well and faithfully discharge the duties of our offices. We make a choice when we're a federal employee to make a promise. We promise to do these things, so we're promise makers. Federal employees are promise makers. And we do that freely. We choose to do that. Our oath says, I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So who are federal employees? We're promise makers. We should also be promise keepers. What do we do? How do we describe what we do as public servants at the federal level, at this level of identity? In Ethical Service, an employee handbook, which is a handbook that OGE created, and our materials are available on our website for your purposes, we have language that you can use, you can borrow, which deals precisely with answering that question. We as public servants safeguard the integrity of our nation's government. We go on with some further details, but as a general proposition, as public servants, our job, what do? We safeguard the integrity of our nation's government. So what do we believe? What do we value and believe? As federal government employees of the executive branch, we have general principles and standards of conduct that demonstrate or that illustrate what we believe in and what we value. Now, OGE has taken the liberty, I guess, of reducing those 14 principles to just a few that you also could incorporate into your new employee orientation, which is to say, anyone who's an executive branch employee, if you choose to be an executive branch employee, then there are some expectations. We value the rule of law and we respect it in all of our work. We value selfless service, so we don't misuse our public positions in order to benefit ourselves. We value responsible stewardship of the resources we've been given as government employees. So we are responsible in the use of our time, our position, our authorities, and all the resources that are given to us as federal employees. So that's who are we, or some answers to the question, who are we, at the highest level, which is to say the broadest level, as executive branch employees, as federal government employees. But where it's really going to resonate with your employees is that obviously at the agency level, maybe even at the bureau level, probably more so at the bureau level, even at the sort of discrete task professional level. But these questions are ones that you have to answer for your employees. OGE can't give you language to substitute for your own language. We don't know what the cultures of your organizations are. Only you do. But you need to make them manifest to your new employees. They need to know, who are we as an agency? What's our mission, of course? What's our vision? What are our goals? But what's our purpose? How do we describe the value of what we do to each other and to the public? What do we value and believe? Because agency cultures are different, and because your missions are different, there's certain things that you value or you have priorities of values and beliefs because they are more consonant with the specific mission or function of your agency. They're tied inextricably to the actual work that your agency does. There are some obvious examples, maybe not obvious, I think they're obvious examples. I think DoD and the services are always the first ones that come to mind when we think about having a set of core values. And each of the services has them, as does DoD generally. But DoD and the services are not alone in that. The FBI, which is a bureau of the Department of Justice, has its own core values that are very inextricably tied with the mission and vision and function and jobs that the FBI perform. USDA OIG has a set of core values that it asks its employees to subscribe to. Now, none of these values statements, none of these lists of core values is in any way incompatible with the principles and standards of conduct. And so we don't need to treat them as being discrete sets of values that we can speak to our employees about. Because at the end of the day, they're all reaching toward the same goal of having employees conduct themselves and the work of the agency or the particular bureau with integrity, protecting the programs and the operations and the reputation of the agency by making sure that people conduct their daily work according to a set of values that will help protect the integrity of that work. It can go even to more discrete levels of work and be tied even more directly to the work employees are doing for certain groups of employees. NIH peer review has its own set of core values, again, tied discretely and specifically to the work that employees are performing. So they can see why subscribing to these values and beliefs matters, because it's tied directly to the way that the programs and operations are realized. One of the best examples I have seen of a group of employees who have articulated this for themselves is at the Forest Service. I came across this employee handbook that they put together very recently. I think it's a very recent vintage. And I believe that it came about, the idea for it and the realization of it came about, at least in part as a result of the furlough that we experienced. This is one of the most impassioned, clear statements of identity, purpose, and belonging that I think I have ever seen. So if you are not sure you understand what I'm asking you to attempt to do with either you creating this messaging or you finding this messaging that exists in your agency and you tapping into it in order to tie the executive branch level ethical principles and the standards of conduct intimately into these conversations about identity, purpose, and belonging. I've given you a copy of this, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at it because I think it is a real inspiration for all of us who struggle to try to articulate these kinds of statements for ourselves. The last thing we're going to talk about, but I'm not going to talk about it in part one, this is going to be the subject for part two, is once we've articulated these who are we statements about what we do and what we value and believe, then how do we incorporate the work piece? How do we make these things manifest for people so that we help pull it together for them so that they can see this operationally in their day-to-day work lives? So in the next part, we're going to talk about how do we do our work consistent with our values and beliefs? How do we help our new employees anticipate the ways in which the work they're going to be asked to do are going to bump them up against ethical principles and values? Where are they going to likely encounter, for example, what we call a conflict of interest? How are they going to even know what it looks like? This is the how piece we're going to talk about next. How does it show up? How do we help them see how it's going to show up? And I'm going to try to take as an initial example the Forest Service's information and show you how I, if I were a member of the Forest Service, would try to incorporate my ethics piece, my questions about ethical conduct into the materials that the Forest Service have already developed for themselves. So in the next section, part two, we're going to be talking more about who we are, but we're going to be answering the specific question, how do we do our work with integrity?